academic year's Island Lecture Series. My name is Pooja Kumar. I just started in May as the coordinator for the Institute of Island Studies, and I think some of you must know Laurie, who has done this role before and has been the chair of the Institute for a while. The Island Lecture Series has been running through the Institute of Island Studies on and off since the late 1980s. I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Institute of Island Studies operates on Epequid, the traditional, ancestral and contemporary lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The land on which the Institute operates was never conquered, surrendered, given up or ceded by the Mi'kmaq, who have lived here for over 12,000 years. Starting in 1725, a series of peace and friendship treaties was signed between the British and Mi'kmaq, intended to formalize military alliances between the two groups. These treaties guaranteed the Mi'kmaq the right to hunt, fish, gather and earn a reasonable living without British interference. The British did not always honor these peace and friendship treaties and caused the death, displacement and dispossession of many Mi'kmaq people. Because the Mi'kmaq were never conquered and never surrendered Epequid, all settler occupations, including the University of Prince Edward Island and the Institute of Island Studies, remain on unceded territory. It is our responsibility to honor these treaties, which call for an ongoing relationship between nations, and to advocate for indigenous sovereignty. By offering this land acknowledgement, we are committing to honoring the treaties. So, I would like to introduce Eric. Whose last name I will not pronounce correctly. I can call him Eric because I've spent the last couple of days interacting with him. He is a brilliant, articulate, and interdisciplinary scholar and practitioner. His background is in linguistics. He spent a large amount of time in academia, advising academic disciplines ranging from economic development to law. He works at the University of Aruba, where he leads many different enterprises, including something called an academic foundation year, which was a transitional program meant to make sure that students were integrating in different ways through the education system where they needed assistance. And he leads something which is called the SISSTEM program, which through his experience he brings a social science understanding to the engineering, mathematics and technical sort of orientations. A lot of his work involves combining what the sciences and humanities have to offer together. And the title of his talk today is about sustainable island solutions through STEM, the SISSTEM programs at the University of Aruba. So I will not get into the associations he has with the UNDP or the affiliation with the University of Antwerp. He is fairly connected and he is someone who represents the sort of work we do here at the University of Aruba. So he understands what islands are about, he understands what island studies is, and there are different pieces of terminology that are used in different places. So welcome Eric, and we are so delighted we could make it in person to open our lecture series.
Thank you, Pooja, for that kind introduction. It's always difficult to live up to the expectations if you're introduced like this, so I will fail you miserably. My name is Mijts, and it's not easy to pronounce it when English is your mother tongue or one of your languages. And yes, 2 days ago I arrived in Prince Edward Island, and I've been welcomed by the people of the Institute here, and I've been welcomed by the people from the Canadian Climate Change Institute, and I've also been welcomed when I was walking around the waterfront by somebody who walked up to me and said to me, "Mita conhece bocara," which means in Papiamento, the language of the people in Aruba, "I know your face." And the person knew my face, shook my hand, knew my name, and said, I'm from Aruba, but he said it in Papiamento, I'm from Aruba and I'm on a cruise. I just got here, I just got off the boat and I see your face here. And he walked on. So I still don't know his name, but I'm grateful for being here and I'm grateful for that connection. Because as Puja just introduced, I like being connected, and I've had the honor of seeing parts of Prince Edward Island now, and I keep on saying I'm impressed, and I am glad to connect to this island territory because it has so many richness to it. And today I want to take you on a little adventure going to a place that is quite far away from here. It's Aruba. And Aruba is an island territory that is known to most people as one happy island. Marketing, if you look it up, you'll find all kinds of pictures of happy people on the beach. There's one happy island and the nation is called Aruba.com. That's what our license plates say. Now, I don't know whether you know where it is, but I'm just going to help you out here because otherwise I'll keep you hanging. It's a little bit north of Venezuela, only 30 kilometers north of Venezuela. Is in the south of the Caribbean, last island, and it's an island state. To the west, next to Curaçao and Bonaire, also known for some people as tourism destinations, and also connected to 3 islands in the north that are called Saba, Sint Eustatius and Saint Martin, but the people themselves call it Saint Astasia and Saint Martin, because the people over there speak English. The people in those islands in the south, they speak Papiamento. But they're part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Now that's a weird story, but that's historical, of course. People in Prince Edward Island tell me that Prince Edward Island is small. Right? Only 5,400, okay. So Aruba is 178 square kilometers. So that's a small island. So now you can say we're 30 times bigger than Aruba, right? So that's a big island. 30 kilometers north of Venezuela, 120,000 documented residents, and about 20,000 more undocumented residents, which actually makes Aruba the nation in the world with the highest percentage of refugees, because these undocumented residents are refugees from mainly Venezuela, who are escaping the political pressure that is put on them at this moment. Many of them, of course, are also economic refugees, because there's a huge economic gap between a small island state, which is quite a rich tourism state, and Venezuela that is now really economically in trouble. We host more than 2 million tourists a year. Wow. 1.3 million stay over. We're getting to 1 million cruise tourist visitors. And so you have a continuous presence of some 30,000 tourists and growing, right? Now the students who were in my class yesterday already know this. If you want to feed the Aruban population based on traditional agriculture with soil that is as fertile as the soil of Prince Edward Island, you need 225 square kilometers. And that doesn't work, because we only have 178 square kilometers, and the island has been deforested over the ages, so the topsoil has run into the ocean like crazy. Temperatures are up to 34, 35 degrees, and I don't know what you know about that when you're into farming, but it's not the ideal conditions for farming. So actually farming yield is very low. And then as a final one is part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Anyone here who studied political sciences and understands what the Kingdom of the Netherlands is? A little bit or a lot?
Yeah, I'm a member of the Rotary Club, and we just welcomed a 19-year-old exchange student from the Netherlands 2 weeks ago.
And did that student manage to explain that the Netherlands is not only one country, but that the kingdom is actually 4 countries, of which 3 are in the Caribbean, and that the country of the Netherlands has a European part and a Caribbean part, and in that Caribbean part are special municipalities that do not have the same status?
She hasn't yet, because she hasn't, she's 2 weeks away from giving her introductory talk about her country to our Rotary Club.
I challenge you, listen very well to that wonderful student and ask the question whether she understands that the Kingdom of the Netherlands is much more complex than only the Netherlands.
Okay, I will.
I will not further pester you with this a lot. But you've got this country, this slide is a little bit older. You'll see that I've gone down from 120,000 to 112,000, but that's because I made a slide 5 years ago. Population is growing extremely fast in an area that is characterized by a dry desert landscape. Cactuses. If you've ever been in the Caribbean, you have that idea of lush landscapes with lush vegetation, because that's what also like 18th and 19th century painters told us. A big part of the Caribbean actually looks like this. And the consequence is that you can't do agriculture. You have no primary industry. There's fisheries. We have a lot of ocean. Imagine, we've got like 30 times more ocean volume than the Netherlands, which is known as a water state. But we have a lot of ocean, but we have a lack of land, especially fertile land. So, no agriculture, no self-sufficiency there. For water and energy production, a very interesting topic by the way, we are dependent on desalination for water. And you see something coming out of those smokestacks, yes, on oil for energy production. We do have windmills, but they only produce, the alternative energy is only 17 or 18% of the energy mix, and the rest is oil. That water production, you have to imagine, for every cubic meter of water, we use 2 liters of oil. That is 6 kilo of CO2 footprint. In order to get us to drink, to wash our cars, to flush our toilets, and to water our gardens. Think again about that agriculture as well. Local production is not really what you could manage. But then another thing, of course, those smokestacks, they do not only produce CO2, but also NOx, all kinds of poisonous gases, and it flows over the ocean. Now, out there you see the ocean, and the ocean is wonderful. It's an island, and islands are surrounded by water, and the Caribbean islands used to be surrounded by coral reefs. And those coral reefs represented actually like a wealth of biodiversity. But that kind of stresses, where you have the affluence of that water production, which is warmer water, salter water, because you've extracted the water from the salty water, so the salt density goes up, goes back into the ocean, and the coral reefs around there, you won't find them, because they died. And then of course the current takes those effluents down. That's another aspect of the complexity of a small island state like Aruba. Now we don't have production of food, but we also don't have other resources. Some gold was found in the 19th century, made a lot of people come. Then we had an oil refinery, but that was oil that was brought in and brought out again. Then we had some phosphate production that was taken out of the soil, but that was it. And now we have no production. So everything is brought in by container, food, anything that you drive with, anything that you read, anything that you live with, everything is imports. I see somebody shaking their hands like this is a very sad story that this guy is telling. Okay, I'll do the best I can. So no ore, no coal, no oil. They're drilling for oil at the moment because they really are desperate for a second economy. Well, I'm not a big fan of this whole idea because as far as I know, the whole idea was that we were going to phase out fossil fuels and fossil fuel production. And the chances of us finding it are very low. But elections are coming up, so politicians have to tell us that we have a lot of opportunity. But then how do we make that money? Well, that's this view. And I was going to Prince Edward Island, and I'm a very naive person, so I thought like there will be no cruise ships. And the first thing I see on Sunday afternoon is the same cruise ship that comes to Aruba. Just a seasonality. Now it's hurricane season on our side, so then they're here. And when the hurricane season stops, they pop over to the Caribbean and they start sailing over there, and then they come to us. Our capital has about 20,000 inhabitants. On a good day, we have 20,000 tourists that are walking around, not knowing where to go, except for the fact that they want to eat something very quickly, and they want to buy a ring or something that reminds them, often something produced in China that says, "I love Aruba," and that they can take to somewhere to show off that they've been with us. But the whole tourism industry, including about 12,000 hotel rooms at this moment and 3,400 more in the making, because we're preparing for you to come, creates one thing that is actually one of the most complex things to get your mind around if you're talking about small island territories, and especially small island states. We have huge amounts of waste, really huge amounts of waste. And you have to think of the island, if you think of the geography, where you have the cruise terminal, the airport, the harbor, the freight harbor, and in between is a landfill. And strategically positioned together, because everything that comes in at a certain moment ends up at the landfill. At the highest point it was 39 meters high, and is strategically located inside or on top of a mangrove forest, next to these same coral reefs, and also at a place where we teach the small children to sail. That has been going on for about 60, 70 years, and of course that's a disgrace. Everybody knows that. Nobody's going to deny that this is a big issue. But with population growth, population density, everything going on, everybody wanting to buy everything all the time, that landfill has grown until it has become an unrepairable damage, because of course every time we have rains, we don't have that much rain, but when it rains it's a lot at once, pushes down in the water column and pushes down all the heavy metals, all the contaminants through the soil, and on a good day it comes out again where coral reefs were. So I'm just telling you this not to make you depressed or ask you for pity or whatsoever, just to give you an idea that you're actually talking about a very wicked problem of unbridled economic development without thinking about the consequences and without people having thought about how to plan, sorry Pooja, how to plan the infrastructure in such a way that is actually sustainable towards the future. And then you get this whole issue of population density, what is built up area and what's left over as natural area. And here, this map only presents built up area, as pixels. Then the space in between is less densely built up area, and we have the national park. The national park, which at this moment is really focusing on ecotourism, which sounds very well, but it means that you're taking those 2.x million tourists into nature to give them an additional experience. And the population is growing quickly because there's 3,000 more hotel rooms coming up. And every hotel room needs about 4 people to work in it. So there's 12,000 people that are not present on the island at this moment. And when they bring their families, which I hope they can, you're talking about 30,000 more people. And then you're asking yourself, like, is this livable for people? Is there not a tilting point where economic growth turns into individual loss? And the answer to that is, of course, yes. At this moment, there are protests in society where people are saying, no more hotels, we don't want this growth anymore. And we have young people, some of them are my students, sorry, going on the beach, and they go and sit between the tourists, and then they ask those tourists whether they know that Aruba is actually under a lot of pressure. And that got the attention of the Minister of Tourism, because the Minister of Tourism cried out in the media that it was an outrage that the Aruban students are attacking tourists. I think they're just coming up for their right as a citizen who thinks about the future and livability of where they come from. And the last bit is, of course, it's part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands that you will be introduced to. And I'm not going to do Netherlands bashing, but the Netherlands was, of course, a colonizing nation that actually set up many of the structures that are putting up those pressures right now. The landfill, the water production, the way it's being done, the infrastructure and the legislation behind it is all Dutch design. adopted by our present-day governments, of course, and continued by the present-day governments. And they are also connected to all these different factors, because the whole idea is that we need to grow our economy to be successful in order to be part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and to be of use. It's the last negative thing I'm going to say here, because being of use comes hand in hand with the fact that the islands were framed when the Spanish discoverer found the islands and described them in 1498. There are caps that you can buy in Aruba where it says established in 1498, which is interesting for the people that used to live there, in the same place. And they describe it in their ship's diary as islas inutiles, useless islands. Apparently the island has to have an economic value for the conqueror. And until today that question is continuously being raised, like what value is there for the connection between the Netherlands and Aruba, but also between the islands. And it's an interesting question, because of course the islander who lives in Aruba has the intrinsic value of being from that island, of being connected to that island, and has the right to manage that island and understands that island. But that kind of values is actually ignored in this kind of discourse, right? It's being marginalized. And I'm a linguist in background, that part was true of what Pooja was telling us. And as a linguist, I've also learned to understand that this language that the people speak, Papiamento, is also being marginalized, as being of less value and of less use in order to be useful in the global sphere. So Aruba is a small island state in the Caribbean, but it is characterized by a complex of intertwined sustainability challenges at economic level, at environmental level, and at social level. And then you can sit there and complain about all those things, etc., but that's not like my character. So I feel like we must find ways to develop something to address sustainability and make sustainability a topic for our island. Because at the University of Aruba we had a law faculty, that was the first one, because we need rulers who know the law, and we need lawyers. I'm not against lawyers, I was the dean of the law faculty, don't worry. Then we have an economy, so you need accountants, bookkeepers and economists, so then we had an economy faculty, both doing very good work, both very successful. Then tourism industry, so you need it's a wrong name, Faculty for Hospitality and Tourism Management Studies. They call themselves the fun faculty. I understand it, I mean they really look at the product of Aruba and making that look nice for the outside world and growing that economy. And then we got the Faculty for Arts and Sciences, finally, in 2004. It was a little bit late, where people really look into governance issues, social work, and the question that we started to raise in 2016, why don't we have anything that really is focused on sustainability from a real technological science perspective, while taking into account that sustainability is not only about the environment, but is also about the human. And so we set up a program called SISSTEM, in which we try to address sustainability issues in small island states, so not only Aruba, to have a nationwide impact. But what we discovered was there was quite a gap between the idea of doing that and the practice. And one of the reasons is, of course, we're a small island state. We have limited capacity. One of the lines I wrote while writing this project was to build the critical capacity to address sustainability issues. I should have known at that time that I got myself into trouble. Because if you don't have the critical capacity to address sustainability issues, how are you going to train them? Because it can't come from me. So we had to bring together a group of people that could do that. And we had to get our government on board. And it was a lot easier, because our Prime Minister in those days was really a fan. He wanted to call it a green faculty. because the political color of his party was also green. But he also had a vision of Aruba as a flagship state for sustainability. So we got European funding, substantial European funding to set up the program and to set up the facilities. So, this is what I'm going to do in the last 15 minutes about, is tell you like, then what is that program about, what do we have at the moment. We started in 2019, we're 2024 now, it's only 5 years in the making. And we have quite some things that we managed to produce, but what does that look like and what does that achieve in that society? So the SISSTEM program is a bachelor and a master program of science for sustainability and engineering. Setting up something that we didn't have. So how do you do that? You do that in partnership. We started working with a big European university. Big as in, like, they are in Belgium called the KU Leuven, and on their website now they say 3 years from now they will have existed for 600 years. Which is quite an old university, traditional, but they're also one of the top 10 leading innovation universities worldwide. And they have all these programs for sustainability and technology and engineering, etc. You start working with them and you think like, we've got a great partnership, these people, they know what they're doing, so we just need to take their knowledge, bring it to our island, and they can implement it, and then we can copy that and do that for the next 10 years. Which is of course very naive. Because looking at those institutes, you actually have some kind of vision that they have that is nice to put on their CVs, that they set up something in a small island state somewhere far away, without taking responsibility for it. Because where does the responsibility lie? On the island. And so one of the big things that we had to learn as a group was, as a small group of academics, to stand up against those big voices from Europe, that we need programs that are organized in such a way that our students can study that. And that our students are not the Belgian students or the American students, but are students from an island context that actually speak 4 languages already. You don't have to teach them additional languages. They speak Papiamento, Spanish, English, and some Dutch. But that if you then come in and you don't speak English, that is not a problem of the student, but it's your problem. And you as a lecturer will have to solve that and bridge that. And if you use continuously continental examples for those students about how you do high tech, big tech in Europe and in the United States, that is never going to fly with a student that actually wants to recognize their own context and their own environment. And often they don't even understand that environment. That's what we have to learn. That's why we teach. But if you teach about elsewhere, you're never going to understand here. Or it's going to be very difficult. You're going to have to be a very abstract thinker. So we did a STEM bachelor and a STEM master. And they're both running now. Up and running. But it has to be embedded in a local, small island state context. And you see, I don't use SIDS. I refuse to do that. Because that's the UN agenda, apparently, that small island territories and small island states have to develop. Whereas large continental, landlocked and so on states have no such mission anymore. They only have to come to develop us. Why do you need to have small island developing states? And we have the SDGs, while the other nations are just countries. And so it's also the discourse about it that you have to change. Of course, you have to have a sustainability backbone, but the last one is very important for me. A focus on interdisciplinary and transdisciplinarity. We cannot set up a chemistry department, an environmental sciences department, a physics department, an engineering department, etc., etc., etc. We bring the students together in one classroom and they all study the same. But they can put their accents. But all of them also have to understand that if you're engineering a new solution, it has an economic and social price. So they also learn about entrepreneurship, they also learn about the philosophy of sustainability, they also learn about politics. tell you a little bit more about politics in a second. We also set up a research program where actually PhD candidates work in Aruba with an Aruban daily supervisor, and in the first case with the EU project, all formal supervisors from Leuven. Training our people to be co-supervisors in a trajectory like that, getting the accreditation from Leuven that those PhDs are real, because in those days people were really saying, like, if it's a PhD from the University of Aruba, we cannot take it seriously. We're working on that, and we're being taken more and more seriously, but if you start out with something like that, you really need to get those students a real, recognizable document. And these students are working on a wide range of topics, including water desalination, as well as social justice. Because it's as important to have the biochemical understanding of what you're doing as how do people connect with that, and how can people interact with that. And we also have people working on the coral reefs, of course, and on the pressure of tourism. Now, I've learned a couple of things throughout the years. Doing this doesn't make you popular. Some people still like what I do, but the lab that we were promised didn't get to be there. Because when you start talking about bioenvironmental monitoring, politicians all of a sudden become scared. I told you, that was an oil refinery. There's been all kinds of extractive agriculture, so when you start soil sampling, you're not telling a nice story. Now, we found solutions for that. The lab is going to be finalized in February, so I'm not too unhappy about that. And we have great facilities now, because we got a convent that of 2,000 square meters that is now our facility, and where we now have our offices. It only took 5 years. So for 5 years we were working in a room of 24 square meters, and now we have 2,050. We really don't know what to do with the 26 last square meters of those 2,050, because the rest is full. And of course you're looking for service to society. Trying to help farmers, Farmers Union, the National Parks Foundation, food security projects, and our government to get our minds around complex problems. And you continuously keep on seeing that our government likes to go to the consultants from the United States. We had a conference in which our Minister of Nature and Environment actually announced very proudly, SISSTEM project was organizing this, and he announced very proudly that he had signed that day a contract with an American consultancy firm to do a sounding for climate change and indicators for that. Whereas the young kids that are actually doing that in Aruba were sitting in the same room. And where we as a faculty were also there. So you're also talking about creating an understanding that we as a community can do so much more than only be dependent on the other. I told you about the whole economy. I mean, tourism economy, it's nice, I understand it, etc. And I've worked in cultural centers and in restaurants myself, so I know that you can make a living of that. But you can also look at how can you do it differently, and how can we do the best effort to do it differently. So at the end, we had this bachelor program where, I'm not going to take you through it because you're not going to study with me, but it's a 3-year bachelor program. We have a master program now, etc. But we had quite a number of challenges. And the first big challenge there is keeping the administration of the university and politicians aligned. I told you the first Prime Minister who really wanted that green faculty, he didn't completely win the elections at a certain moment. And we got another Prime Minister and another Minister of Education, and Minister of Education heard about the SISSTEM project and said, that is 13 million euros. We can really invigorate another part of the island, which is the old oil refinery, and build a digital school there. And so you get called up, and you've been working on this for 4 years, and you're being asked, how can we transfer this to this project, because this is actually what we want now. And then your diplomatic skills have to be trained a little bit, and you have to explain to them that it is indeed possible to do that, and that I would not oppose that, of course. It would, of course, be quite a job to write a new project so that the EU would be willing to finance that, because the EU has allocated this money for the SISSTEM project. Simply telling them that if you do this, you lose the project. So it has to be owned by people, and you have to have some kind of advocacy. You sometimes have to bully a little bit. But also within the university, of course, you have to find ways to manage it in such a way that people don't think, look at them, they're just playing around. Because if you do field work, you know that, right? Doing field work, you're just driving around a little bit and you go sampling, and then you play with your instruments in your lab. You like it so much that you do that till 2 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock at night, because we have no social lives, and then out comes a paper, and that's easy for us. So the kind of jealousy for a new program, of course, you have to navigate that too. That's one. Well, 1 and 2. 1A and 1B. Finding suitable staff with the right knowledge. That's also an interesting one. The team of SISSTEM at this moment consists of about 40 people, of which 14 are working full-time in Aruba, and there are as many nationalities and as many backgrounds as there are people. One is born in Aruba, born and raised. But the other ones are from Trinidad, from Suriname, from Colombia, from Spain, from Curacao, from the Netherlands, from all over the place, which is an intercultural, interdisciplinary psychological experiment, for which you need a lot of patience and power coming from them to understand where they're coming from and what they need. And the bad thing about it for me was we started during COVID. Not during COVID, right before COVID. I mean, if I'd known that COVID would have such an impact, I would have waited a little bit. But we started September 2019. And so for the first 4 months, everything seemed to be okay, except for some weird news. And then in January, February, March, all of a sudden everything came to a standstill. And on the 27th of March, all my international students were sitting on airplanes, back to where they came from. A part of my staff was going away. Another staff member had just been engaged to his partner and came back on the 25th of March to continue his work, and has not seen his partner for 2 years. Being segregated. And in that context we needed to figure out how to do this. But we got somewhere. First one is what we absolutely underestimated, the time investment, not only to adapt the courses, but to learn what is needed for our students to adjust those courses, to make them grow. Because you can look at all kinds of traditional things that have grown over 600 years, but you also want to look at what do our students in our context need, and what does our professional field need, and how can we make that match, and how can we make them see that this is the way you can also do something. And you have to find a way, of course, between too much engineering and too much social sciences. Now you've noticed I speak a lot, I'm good at talking, so people thought it was only about social sciences, while those poor kids were studying mathematics. And then, I'm not going to take this one for too long, but I put the island studies logo in it. But challenges for research in small island states, small island territories, is that many of the academic solutions have an abstract nature that are not easily translated into understanding in society. So bringing the community in is very important. So I have one program that's called, and it's partly connected to the SISSTEM program, Community-Based Research for Sustainable Development in Small Island States. And it's all about teaching students to work with community members and make that research meaningful. Second one is, of course, one of the challenges that we face is the ready-mades. People are used to taking things off the shelf. And we had one report in the leading up to the SISSTEM project where the consultants were talking about geothermal pumps, etc., to keep our houses warm. And then we live in an island where it never gets cooler than 26 degrees Celsius, so I was a little bit lost until I found the word Iceland somewhere. And then I realized that they just didn't find and replace, and they hadn't because there was a CD with this little pearl under it, so it was misspelled, and it was all of a sudden a palimpsest of fraud by the consultants. But scale, of course, scalability, and the question of whether you can implement solutions from elsewhere or whether you should contextualize them, keeping in mind that scale is very important. And we are working now with student groups of 10 people, cohorts of 10 students. And we're not going to grow much bigger unless we get more international students in, and those need to come back now that we have the facilities, etc. And then you can, so in the second semester my student group is 35, but the first year has 10 students. It's simply because of that internationalization. And the recognition of local expertise. I mean, it's all fine and well that we bring in lecturers from abroad. It's important. But I always match them up with local lecturers, with local young people that can learn and develop from there and add. And then, so important, I've been talking about this with Laurie Brinklow, you need to have networks. Not only networks where you say, okay, we can send you something and you do something with that, but really networks of people that engage and support each other in really making sure that we have a firm understanding of what islandness actually means when you're talking about sustainability. And then, of course, we need to understand intercultural communication, understand that we look from different perspectives, that cultures are different, and that we are multidisciplinary. And so, this is a drawing actually by DALI AI, and it's an interesting one. It was made by one of the PhD candidates who said, like, well, this is what comes out of artificial intelligence if I describe system to them. Which is apparently, and this looks a little bit like me when I'm teaching, except for the beard, because we spend a lot of time outside. Experiential learning, bringing people to the landfill, bringing people in the interface between the ocean and the beach, taking people to the water plant and to the electricity factory, etc., in order to get a deep understanding of what are you really doing. Unfortunately, the university doesn't look like this. It's a building, it's a beautiful building. I didn't actually bring, oh, there's some pictures there. A series of outcomes is that we have the first bachelor graduates now, 5 years into the program. The first PhD defense has taken place. The first master's defense is coming up in 3 months. We have had about 100 conference presentations by our students and by our team. About 25 papers have come out by now, A1 papers, so it's not the interviews that we do, etc. The Bioenvironmental Sciences Lab is under construction, it's getting there, and we managed to renovate a historical landmark that had been abandoned for 10 years. There were trees growing to the roof of the chapel, which is very environmental, I know, but we needed to talk with the tree about place and future. We have a coral restoration project ongoing. We've just finalized a project on food security in small island states on 4 different places, and with 4 papers coming out of that one. So it's really getting its traction and impact. Partly because of academic knowledge, but with only academic knowledge it would never have worked. So, if we want to do something in a small island state, and Ryan is thinking like, I've seen these pictures, yes that's true, but it's from another presentation of mine. You need to look below the surface and need to look at what are the obstacles that you encounter and what are the predators, because a beautiful fish on the right hand side is a lionfish that is actually eradicating part of the Caribbean fish population. So sometimes it looks nice, but you want to be careful, and it's very stingy, really hurts your fingers. And the Turning the Tide Coral Restoration Project also, of course, is grounded in finding ownership, challenging conservation agendas, framing of vulnerable states. But by now we have about 1,400 new coral outplants in the ocean, and as you can see see in the picture on the right-hand side that ocean didn't have coral in it anymore because it had simply died off by human pressure. And now combining our knowledge of environmental ecology, environmental studies and ecology, and the genetics work we're doing, we can outplant corals that do manage to survive in these contexts and can be the kickstart of revitalization of those coral reefs. This is a very vague one. On the left you see Marion, who's painting the coral reefs underwater, the leftover coral reefs. She's a Canadian artist actually, from Nova Scotia, and she comes to Aruba for free 4 months at a time. And we put a lot of lead on her, and then she goes down to the bottom of the ocean and makes wonderful paintings. And on the right-hand side you see the work by Michael Teja, a friend of mine, who actually was nominated for the Prix de Rome and then made a piece of art about the work that we do in Aruba of 60 panels, altogether 60 square meters, pushing that work in the face of the Dutch population to show that you can do things differently in a post-colonial island context. And that's why in June here at the University of Prince Edward Island we have the Turning the Tide conference, Island Imaginaries and Interdisciplinaries in Climate Change. And actually Laurie Brinklow and I, Jean Mitchell, Ross Dwyer, Ryan Drew, Tristan Atkins, are working on making that a wonderful experience for everybody in order to bring together 150 or something people from all kinds of disciplines to evocate the same kind of mission. Bring together the disciplines in order to tackle the big problems that we are facing in our small island contexts. Thank you. Pooja, do you want to take over?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Eric. That was really wonderful because you gave us the whole context and then you told us that you're actually considering it to do something about everything. So, I mean, it is a remarkable and commendable effort that seems to be informed by a strategy, and it's very impressive that someone's even taken that on.
Not alone.
Yeah, and I'm sure as I hear this and other people hear this, there are so many similarities in the context that we see on Prince Edward Island. So I would like to invite someone other than me to say something that came to their mind or ask Eric a question. He's leaving tomorrow and we would love to get as much as we can from him. So who wants to say something, ask something,
I have a question. So like, what metrics or indicators do you use to evaluate the success of the project?
Yeah, that's a very important one. So when you write a project like this, you have to sum up your key performance indicators, and we had one little trick there. We said that we would have a maximum of 11 PhD candidates, and the word maximum worked very well, especially because we didn't say that we would have 11 PhD graduates. But you have to have some kind of indicator, first of all, that the programs are there. That's one, the programs are there. Second, that these programs are evaluated well by students. Third is that you have a professional field committee that recognizes the word of what these students do. And then you have to have numbers. Now we are very modest when it comes to numbers, and the ambition for the bachelor program is to get to at least 15 students. I told you we're at 10 now. And the master program, if we have 8 students in the program, we're happy. We have 6 now, and there's 2 more starting in January. And so if not too many students graduate soon, then we're meeting that metric. But I'm also looking at another thing, and that's something we didn't promise to the EU, but I promised to myself, and that is that in the 5 years that we've built this up, we have doubled the academic output of the University of Aruba when it comes to publications. And that, for me, is an important one. It tells you also a lot about what the rest of the university still has to learn. And it gets me into trouble because I'm now the coordinator of the University of Aruba Research Center. That didn't exist before that time, because now they want me to do that for all the faculties. So that's, my hair will be even greater next time you see me. So that is, but I think it's worthwhile doing that. So that's the kind of metrics that we look at.
Does anyone else have something that they would like to ask Eric? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So, like, you mentioned in the beginning, so like the Aruba is like 180 square kilometer with 120,000 people, and the population is still growing. Is there any impact on that for the future, or I mean, have you taken any kind of path to make that possible?
Yeah, this is one of the key questions to ask, I think, when it comes to sustainability and livability.
Yeah.
Social well-being. Like, if you look at Manhattan, I don't know how many people live in Manhattan, but it's a lot. And if you ask New Yorkers, they're happy about living in Manhattan. They take pride in it, they identify, they think it's cool, and they don't mind the tourists because they have their own spaces that they pinpoint as this is us. If you go to Aruba, this is completely different, because Aruba, through that build-up of the oil refinery, and I explained this yesterday to the students, but you had some kind of replacement of the population or marginalization of the existing population, getting a new one. Then comes the tourism industry, and the same happens again. So the local population at that moment is not recognized as a successful workforce for the new industry. Also has to do with the extent to which you can exploit people, of course. Because if people resist exploitation and you want to build a new industry, you bring them from somewhere else where people were really desperate to get something, to get bread on their plate. That makes sense, but it disrupts the balance of society. That is happening big time in Aruba at this moment. And so what you need in order to keep, you can either choose to diminish the growth, of course. You can also invest in infrastructure, schooling, education, culture, places that people can connect to as landmarks that they are proud of. And then all of a sudden you have a change in that appreciation. Doesn't mean that you can grow unlimited, because we have no hinterland. So you really have to address all those challenges, including waste management, including healthcare, including social security, including what do you do with ambulant drug addicts and how do you deal with that, because at this moment we have a very nice program. You pick them up off the street, you bring them to a place that is a little bit remote, and you wait for them to come back. But that's not taking care of people. And so there's an enormous lot of planning that has to go into that. And I think the university has to play an important role there, because it has to do with legislation, it has to do with what the people at the SISSTEM program are doing, it has to do with sociology, it has to do with governance and management, and bringing those together. And the government will not, by itself, run to the social security department and start handing out money, because you always have that economic perspective, apparently, in this kind of states. So we really need to work on that, bringing all those parties together, and I think one of the arenas for that will be the university. So there's an enormous lot of work to be done there. I need you.
Are you doing any programs where you pull in, like, the community with participatory action research with governments?
Yeah. So what we do is, to give you one example, is I told you about the lack of water.
Yes.
There's no groundwater. Actually, in the 1920s, all the groundwater was pumped up out of the soil to cool the installations of the refinery, as a consequence of which the existing plantations withered away and 1/5 of the children died. That's the history that is real. Same happened in Curacao. So you have a big issue there. The aquifer is dried up. If you would create new water catchment systems at a household level and at the national level in the watersheds, you could solve a lot of those questions. You need to talk with people about what their needs are, or what their willingness is, etc. So I had a program running in the first half of this year, actually, together with the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries and Husbandry, and the Minister of Agriculture, and my students going out to all the farmers in Aruba and the home farmers to talk with them about those needs and possibilities and their willingness to support it. And that is where you can see that all of a sudden these farmers are connecting with this question and are actually now a political pressure point to get this kind of programs going. So that is where we can successfully work. Another one that I can give you, and that's the biggest success story in the simplest way possible. We have the national park. You know what UTVs are? They've those off-road motorbike-ish things. So if you have this very vulnerable, arid ecosystem and you drive through it with a UTV, the only thing is you create dust. The dust created like a mortality shadow downwind from all those dirt tracks, and people want to go off-roading, so you drive on a gravel road, but then the gravel road is too smooth and it's not a real off-road experience, so you go off that road. And if you would look at the satellite maps of the North Coast, you saw that spread of off-road tracks, killing off all the vegetation on the North Coast. So one of my students went to the park, first of all did a calculation of the number of UTVs that came on certain hours, and then she just started to sample dust accumulation on plants, and plant cover, plant diversity, and how much was still alive. That paper, student paper, bachelor free, undergraduate, was used in Parliament to ban the UTVs from the national parks. And that kind of impact for me is actually, you don't need this one anymore, that kind of impact is where I see that we're doing something right.
Thank you very much for the talk. The system approach that you're using and the uniqueness of it being located where it is in Aruba, because islands are that microcosm, do you think that that approach could be applied elsewhere in the Caribbean or in cold water islands, or do you see value in pushing it out that way? And secondly, with the success, do you feel that that's being recognized through the Netherlands side of it, or do they have an understanding that this unique island program could be brought forward and used within the Netherlands?
The second one is interesting. The first one, let me first tackle the first one, because the second one is beyond my comprehension. The first one, we're getting that kind of request at the moment. So I'm being asked to do consultancy for other universities, and even the largest university in the Caribbean, University of the West Indies, is now interested in getting something like this and getting a partnership so that they can start integrating this kind of principles. It cannot be a money-making idea for us because we really want this to happen, so I'm not going to sit at a fair and say, I've got a book here, and I'll take my hand off it when you give me so much money. So it's really on a, like, if you want this, we can talk with you about it. You also asked about cold water islands. I think it doesn't matter what kind of temperature you have. I mean, I've got those great coral reefs to talk about. If you're in Prince Edward Islands, you can talk about the landscape, the dunes, anything above the floodline. And maybe even get beyond the floodline. So I think that that doesn't matter. It's really that approach where you integrate society and social sciences into that understanding. That's actually what is happening here at the Institute and in Mijts. So we have a very similar program, which is what we discovered after I studied my stuff in Aruba, so I should have met you earlier. Which is a truism. Then, could I do something with this in the Netherlands? Yes, yes, and yes. If there wouldn't be this very strong power structure that is exerted by the traditional universities. But they are looking at us when it comes to education for sustainable development. How do you measure that? And how do you have an impact there? So that transformative power of education for sustainable development. But it's actually thanks to one of my colleagues, Anouk Mertens, who has really studied that in our little university and is now using that in Leuven. to do the same. So in that way, I see something happening. But that's not the kind of inspiration that I like to bring to other small island territories.
Does anyone else have burning questions? We've kept Eric a while. I do have one. I was wondering how easy it's been to get the people who are harder science and social sort of science backgrounds to work together. Like, how have you even recruited for your 40 staff, and how has it gone as that experiment of people with different backgrounds?
Yeah, it's kind of a sociological experiment. One thing is that you need to keep on talking and keep on explaining to each other what you're doing. And I have an advantage. I have a long history in academia, and once I started studying biology, so I still knew something about those things, so I could understand the language that people were speaking. But the main thing is that you continuously have to reiterate the importance of the science and technology side of what we're doing to the social sciences people and the other way around. And there's one way to do that I know that works very well, is cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've cooked a lot for that team and brought people together and made them understand and talk about what they're doing in different places. And nowadays, I don't have to do that anymore because we've got senior students telling new lecturers how inspired they are by the combination of the different sides. But I still cook for the team. But it is a way to bring people together and really get them to understand and listen. And that also happens with like our external support teams, and they come out of their extremely disciplinary, rigid structure. I am a chemist, but I'm only studying that part of chemistry. No, it's even smaller. And then they only want to talk about that. And I put them within the team, and they're all working from one huge room. I let them talk to each other and tell them, like, I'm doing that part, I'm doing that part, I'm doing that part, but I connect with. And you're seeing that those people also become interested. And we've got somebody who's doing remote sensing, who's now very much interested in what you can learn from remote sensing with drones and satellites, and then how you can turn it into a policy story. And that kind of interactions is very important for me. There's no golden key, but I think we should all learn to do that.
More cooking, more washing dishes, more gatherings, more
Washing
normal things that people connect through.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And go out in the field together. Support each other, do that field work and spend your time in the lab with them. And just, if your hands are not shaking, hold that reagent and be patient, because then you're really doing the same thing together. Yeah.
Maybe we can try to have some food at the next lecture. Feel free to stick around and chat with Eric. He is leaving tomorrow. I will stop the formal question answer session at this point by giving you a small token of appreciation.
My second potato bag in my life.
Your second potato bag, well, this one has a book in it that Bren and Laurie weren't sure that we should give you because it's not our newest and shiniest, but I believe it is a popular one amongst people from Prince Edward Island. It's by somebody who is a folklorist and storyteller, John Cousins, and you will learn something about Prince Edward Island and its culture through it. So I hope you enjoy it. Could we just have a round of applause for that? Just a reminder that we do have lectures every month through till April. Our next one is October 22nd. It's actually a book launch for Finding Home at the Harbour, which is by Barbara Palmer-Rousseau, and it's a book about natural history, and it's illustrated by the author who is finishing up her Mijts program. We have a public forum on homelessness and food insecurity on Canada's Food Island, on November the 7th, which is a Thursday evening, and that's over in the McKinnon Auditorium in McDougall Hall. November 19th is our November lecture, which is about water sustainability on Prince Edward Island. That's here again, like the book launch, and that's by Michael van den Heuvel, who is a Canada Research Chair here about water. And December we have one about fisheries management in a changing climate by someone who's finished up their master's work again in island studies and is working a little bit to make the results of her work known to government. So it's an environmentally themed semester. We will switch courses in January, but please come out for any of the other events. We will have stuff up on our website. And thank you again so much for coming today. Take advantage of the fact that I